Hello, creepers. Before we dive in, hit like, subscribe, and drop in the comments the worst place you can imagine during a zombie outbreak. Now let's get to it. The plains stretched out before me, endless and quiet. Nothing but dust, wind, and the sound of my horse's hooves breaking the stillness. That was how I liked it. Wide open land, no lawmen on my back. No townsfolk whispering my name like a curse. Just me, the saddle, and the horizon. I was tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep. The kind that sticks to your bones. I had spent years running, years stealing, years carving out a name that meant fear more than respect. Outlaw, bandit, killer. They called me worse. I never corrected them. Seemed easier to wear the mask than to explain the man underneath it. But there was one thing I could never outrun. Blood. My daughter lived in a town just a few miles east, staying with her aunt. I told myself I left her there for her safety, but deep down I knew the truth. She deserved better than me. Better than a father with wanted posters in every saloon. As the sun started to sink, I spotted smoke curling up against the orange sky. Not the thick black of a prairie fire, more like gray fingers scratching at heaven. Strange thing was, I hadn't heard of any campfires or cookouts out this way. My gut tightened. I nudged my horse forward, slow but steady. The land grew quiet, too quiet. Even the cicadas had hushed. That's when I saw the first body. He was slumped against a fence post, dried blood crusted around his shirt. At first, I figured he'd been shot. Out here, men died for less than a bad hand of cards. But when I climbed down to look, I realized something was off. His eyes weren't shut. They were wide open, milky and dull, like he was staring right through me. Then his chest moved. I stumbled back, hand on my revolver. The man groaned, low and hollow. He clawed weakly at the dirt, dragging himself toward me like a rattlesnake with no bones. His face. Lord, I'd seen death 100 times, but never like this. Skin hanging in strips, lips torn back to bare yellow teeth. He lunged, sudden as lightning. I drew and fired. The shot cracked through the silence, echoing off the empty land. The bullet hit him clean, but he kept coming, thrashing in the dust. Took a second shot, right through the head, before he finally went still. Smoke drifted from my revolver as I stood there, heart pounding. What in hell had I just seen? Men don't move after a bullet through the chest. Men don't keep breathing with their guts spilling out. I wanted to turn around, ride west, and never look back. But the smoke in the distance tugged at me. If one corpse could rise up again, what about a whole town? And what if that town was hers? I climbed back into the saddle, spurred my horse on. The sky bled red as the sun dipped lower. Every mile I rode, unease gnawed at me harder. Empty wagons on the trail, doors left swinging open, dogs howling from somewhere unseen. Then I reached the edge of a small saloon. Lanterns still burned inside, swaying soft in the gloom. I pushed the doors open with the barrel of my gun. The place was empty, though not quiet. A chair rocked back and forth on its own, knocked loose by something. Glasses lay half full on the counter, beer gone flat. Behind the bar, the keeper slumped over, his face pressed against the wood. I whispered his name, though I didn't know why. He didn't answer, until he did. The man's head lifted, slow and stiff, eyes cloudy, mouth working like it had forgotten how to speak. A sound came out, wet, hungry, wrong. I shot him before he could stand. The blast sent bottles shattering. I reloaded with shaking hands, sweat dripping down my face. This wasn't natural. This wasn't sickness. or plague. This was something else. And my daughter was sitting in the next town over. I holstered my gun, walked back out into the growing dark, and tightened my grip on the reins. Whatever waited ahead, I had to face it. For her. The ride east felt longer than it should have. The closer I got, the heavier the air seemed. The land wasn't dead, not yet. But it sure as hell wasn't living either. Coyotes didn't call. Horses I passed along the trail pawed nervously at the dirt, eyes rolling white, like they knew something was wrong before I did. When the town came into view, it wasn't the place I remembered leaving my daughter in. Boards nailed across windows, carts turned into barricades, smoke rising from more than one roof. The sound of gunfire cracked sharp through the night. I pulled back on the reins and scanned the street. Shadows moved fast between buildings, but they didn't move like men. They staggered, jerked, threw themselves at the barricades with no care for pain or bullets. I saw a ranch hand swing an axe down into one, only for another to slam into him from behind, dragging him screaming into the dirt. My gut twisted hard. If she was still alive in there, she wouldn't be for long. I rode down the main street, revolver ready. Voices shouted at me from the jailhouse, lantern lights spilling out through the bars. "Get inside!" someone yelled. "You want to die out there?" I didn't need to be told twice. I kicked my horse forward and leapt down, rushing through the doors, just as a wave of the dead lurched from the dark. They slammed against the walls, fingers clawing under the windows, jaws snapping like hungry dogs. Inside, I found half a dozen souls. The sheriff stood tall, iron gray hair under his hat, rifle steady in his hands. Beside him, a storekeeper with trembling arms, a young farmhand, barely old enough to shave, a preacher clutching a cross, and a saloon girl with a shotgun that looked too big for her. All of them sweaty, pale, and desperate. Then they saw me. Recognition spread across their faces like wildfire. The preacher whispered my name like a curse. The farmhand spat. The storekeeper muttered, "Outlaw." The sheriff didn't lower his gun, but he didn't fire either. "Ain't you supposed to be rotting in some ditch by now?" he asked. "Not yet," I said, holstering my revolver slow. "I'm not here for you. I'm here for my daughter." That stirred the room. Murmurs, side eyes, a low growl of distrust. The sheriff studied me, eyes hard as nails. Finally, he barked, "We ain't in no position to be choosy. He's got guns, he stays. But hear me, outlaw. One false move, and I'll put you down myself." I nodded once. Didn't matter if they trusted me. Didn't matter if they hated me. All that mattered was getting to her. The dead beat harder against the walls, rattling the jailhouse like a storm. Boards cracked, fingers curled through gaps in the shutters. The farmhand fired his rifle, blasting one back, but two more slammed in where it fell. The girl pumped her shotgun, blowing another apart, but the recoil nearly knocked her flat. The sheriff shouted, "Hold the line!" I found myself firing alongside them, each shot a heartbeat, each flash lighting up those rotted faces. They didn't fight like men. They didn't dodge, didn't retreat. They kept coming, climbing over their own to reach us. One broke through the door, a miner I half recognized. His face was torn clean of skin, jaw hanging by a hinge. He threw himself at me, teeth snapping inches from my neck. I shoved my revolver under his chin and fired, hot blood and black rot spraying across my coat. The preacher gagged, crossed himself, and muttered prayers that did nothing to stop the tide. We fought until smoke filled the room, until the smell of powder and rot choked the air. Bodies piled high outside, but still they pressed on, their groans like a funeral choir. When the last shot rang out, Silence followed for a moment, just the crackle of burning buildings outside. Then the sheriff spoke, low but steady. "This town's finished. Ain't no holding it. We stay here, we die." The storekeeper shouted back, "And where in hell do you think we'll go? You seen what's out there?" The sheriff's eyes flicked to me. "You said your daughter's still here?" I swallowed hard, throat dry as sand. "Schoolhouse, on the far side." The room erupted. The preacher cursed me. The farmhand called me a selfish bastard. Even the girl shook her head, tears in her eyes. "We're not dying for one kid," she said. I drew my revolver, slow, calm, and aimed it at the floor. "You don't have to die for her, but I'll kill every damn thing that stands in my way to get to her. You understand?" The sheriff didn't flinch. He just stared at me, then finally nodded. "Damn fool thing to do. But maybe a fool's all we got left. At first light, we move." The others muttered, cursed, prayed. None of it mattered. I'd seen the dead outside. At first light, there wouldn't be much town left to move through. But for her, I'd walk through hell itself. Dawn crept slow over the rooftops, washing the town in a pale gray light. Smoke curled from the burned-out buildings, and the air carried the stink of powder, ash, and rot. None of us had slept. We sat in that jailhouse like prisoners, waiting for the noose, listening to the dead scrape against the walls, until the first hint of daylight sent them drifting back into the alleys. The sheriff stood first. He looked older than he had the night before, lines carved deep into his face. "Day's come," he said. "If we're moving, it's now." Nobody argued, but the air was thick with doubt. The storekeeper wrung his hands. The preacher whispered a prayer. The farmhand checked his rifle like he knew it wouldn't matter. The girl sat quiet, shotgun across her lap, eyes rimmed red from smoke and fear. I holstered my revolver and pushed through the door. The street beyond was a graveyard. Bodies lay in heaps where they'd fallen, some still twitching, heads half smashed or jaws hanging loose. The horses tied outside had torn free sometime in the night. One carcass lay split open in the dust, ribs gnawed clean. The sheriff muttered, "Lord have mercy." I didn't wait for mercy. I pointed east. "Schoolhouse is that way." We moved fast, single file. Every bootstep echoed too loud. Every creak of wood and broken glass made me grip the iron tighter. The town wasn't empty. Shadows slipped in and out of sight, shapes lurching between walls. A groan drifted down from a rooftop, long and hollow, followed by the scrape of nails on shingles. The preacher clutched his cross tighter. "They ain't gone," he whispered. "Keep moving," the sheriff growled. Halfway down the street, we came to a barricade of wagons overturned across the road. Splintered boards jutted like broken teeth. Behind them, a ranch hand lay with his skull caved in, rifle still in his grip. Flies already buzzed thick around him. The farmhand swallowed hard. "Reckon he was holding them back." "Reckon he failed," I said. We climbed the barricade one at a time. The girl slipped, nearly dropped her shotgun, but I caught her arm before she hit the ground. She gave me a look, part gratitude, part fear, and hurried on without a word. Beyond the wagons, the street opened toward the church square. That's where we heard it, a wet, dragging sound, like something heavy pulled through gravel. Out of the shadows came a man in a tattered suit, jaw slack, eyes pale as milk. His chest was torn wide open, ribs cracked like gates. He shuffled faster when he saw us, groaning deep in his throat. The farmhand raised his rifle, hands shaking. "I got him," he said, but his shot went wide, splintering a window. The thing lunged, quicker than any of us expected. I drew and fired once through the skull. It dropped face first into the dust. The farmhand cursed, teeth clenched. I had him. No, I said. You didn't. We kept moving. More shadows gathered at the edges of the square, drawn by the sound of gunfire. A woman with half her face gone stumbled out of the church doors. Behind her came 3 more, all staggering but quickening when they caught our scent. The sheriff barked, "Run!" We bolted across the square, boots hammering against the dirt. The storekeeper lagged, tripping on broken stone. One of the dead reached for him, claws raking across his coat. He screamed, twisting free just as the girl blasted the thing back with her shotgun. The recoil nearly sent her flying again, but the sheriff hauled her upright and shoved her forward. By the time we reached the far side, the dead were closing in from every corner. Their groans rose like a storm behind us, echoing through the hollow town. We ducked into an alley, pressed tight between leaning walls, the smell of rot choking the air. The sheriff leaned against the bricks, catching his breath. His rifle was empty, the chamber smoking. He spat into the dirt. "We can't keep this up," he said. "Not like this." I wiped sweat from my brow, eyes fixed east where the rooftops thinned and the schoolhouse bell tower scraped the sky. "Doesn't matter," I told him. "We're close." The preacher crossed himself again. The farmhand muttered curses. The storekeeper shook so bad he could barely stand. But they followed. They didn't have a choice. The dead were coming, and the only road left was forward. The alley pressed close around us, shadows thick even with the morning light creeping in. Brick walls leaned like old drunks, windows shattered, curtains torn. Every sound carried, the drip of water, the scrape of boots, the low, distant moans that never stopped. We paused, catching our breath. The sheriff leaned heavy on his empty rifle, jaw tight. The girl clutched her shotgun like it might vanish if she let go. The preacher whispered something low, words meant for God, but swallowed by fear. The storekeeper finally broke the silence. "We can't keep running," he said, voice trembling. "Look at us. We're bleeding ourselves out, step by step. Better we hole up somewhere, wait it out." The sheriff shook his head. "Ain't no waiting this out. You saw the streets. You hear what's out there." He spat into the dirt, though his mouth looked dry as bone. "This town's already gone." The farmhand barked a bitter laugh. "So we just follow him?" He jerked his thumb at me. "Outlaw thinks we're marching to salvation, but all I see is us walking into more death." I holstered my revolver slow, careful. "You got another plan, boy? Maybe sit here and pray. Maybe run west and hope they don't catch you." His face flushed hot, hands tightening on his rifle. "I ain't taking orders from a killer." The preacher stepped forward, cross held high. "He's right. This man carries death with him. Always has. The good book says the wages of sin is—" I snapped, voice low but sharp as a blade. "You think I don't know the cost? You think I don't wake up every night with names carved into my head? I'd done worse than you can imagine, preacher. But none of that matters now. My girl's out there. And if I've got to drag every one of you through hell to reach her, I will." Silence followed. The girl's eyes flicked between us, wide and wet. The sheriff studied me, unreadable, then finally said, "He ain't wrong. Might be a bastard, but he's a bastard that can shoot. Right now, that counts for more than sermons." The preacher muttered something bitter under his breath and turned away. We moved on, but the words stuck like burrs. Every face around me was lined with doubt, with hate, with fear. They weren't following me because they trusted me. They were following because the road behind us was worse than the road ahead. The alleys spat us out near the livery. The smell hit first. Sour, sweet, rotten. Inside, a horse twitched in the straw, half-eaten, ribs picked clean, flies thick as smoke. The storekeeper gagged and stumbled back. That's when we heard the groan. From the shadows, a boy shuffled forward. Couldn't have been more than 12. Face gray, eyes white, shirt torn where teeth had opened him up. His little hands reached out, clumsy but hungry. The girl gasped, shotgun rising, but froze. "He's just a kid," she whispered. The farmhand lifted his rifle, but his hands shook. The storekeeper turned away, muttering, "Lord, no, no." The boy staggered closer, lips peeled back from broken teeth. A sound rattled in his throat, half growl, half cry. Nobody moved. Nobody fired. So I did. One shot, clean through the head. The boy dropped like a stone. The girl screamed at me, voice cracking. "You didn't even, he was gone," I said, cold and flat. "You want to wait till he's on your throat to decide?" Her hands trembled so bad, she almost dropped the gun. Tears ran down her cheeks, cutting lines through the soot. The sheriff's voice came low. "Cost of survival," he said. "Ain't none of us walking out clean." We left the livery in silence. The preacher wouldn't look at me. The girl sniffled, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. The farmhand shot daggers my way, like he was building the courage to put a bullet in me instead of the dead. But I didn't care. I couldn't. My mind was on the schoolhouse, on her face, on whether she'd be waiting behind those walls or lying cold in the dirt. As we reached the edge of the square, the sheriff raised his hand. Ahead, smoke curled from the roof of the schoolhouse. The bell tower stood black against the morning sky. "Looks like trouble," he said. My chest tightened. Trouble or not, that's where she was, and I'd tear down the world to reach her. The schoolhouse stood like a black tooth against the morning sky. Smoke curled from its roof, faint but steady, and the bell tower loomed tall above the rooftops. Every step toward it felt heavier, like the ground itself wanted to hold us back. The sheriff took point, empty rifle gripped like a club. The farmhand followed close, muttering curses under his breath. The preacher dragged his feet, lips moving in prayers that carried no weight. The girl stayed near me, shotgun clutched tight, eyes fixed on the bell tower. And the storekeeper, he just shook, every boot step a gamble whether he'd keep going. We crossed another square, littered with the wreckage of wagons and broken glass. The smell of fire and rot stung my nose. For a moment it was quiet, almost too quiet. Then the first groan came from the shadows. Figures shambled into the light. Half a dozen at first, then more behind them. Their skin was pale and torn, jaws gnashing, arms clawing for us. The sheriff barked, "Move!" and we broke into a run. The farmhand fired, his shot clipping one in the shoulder. It stumbled but didn't fall. He cursed and fired again, this time catching its head. The body crumpled, but the sound was enough to draw more. Doors banged open, windows cracked. They came pouring out like ants from a nest, a tide of teeth and claws. "Allie!" I shouted, pointing. We darted down the narrow passage, boots slipping on blood-stained dirt. The dead followed, faster than they had any right to. Their fingers scraped the walls, their moans bouncing like echoes in a canyon. The preacher tripped on a loose stone and went down hard. One of the things lunged for him, jaws wide. The girl screamed and fired her shotgun, blasting its skull into pieces. The recoil sent her sprawling, but I yanked her back to her feet before the next one reached us. The preacher scrambled up, eyes wild. "God deliver us!" he cried, voice breaking. "Keep moving!" the sheriff roared. We burst out of the alley into a wide street lined with shops. More of them were waiting. Dozens, maybe more, staggering from every doorway. The street filled with their groans, their stench, their hunger. The sheriff swung his rifle like a bat, cracking skulls. The farmhand emptied his rounds wild, dropping 2 but wasting 3 more. The girl fired again, barely holding on as the shotgun bucked. I drew both pistols, firing left and right, each shot snapping a head back. Bodies dropped, but more pressed in, crawling over their own to reach us. The storekeeper froze in the middle of the street, eyes wide, mouth open, but no sound coming. One of the dead lunged, teeth sinking into his shoulder. His scream ripped the morning air. The farmhand shouted and tried to drag him free, but the sheriff pulled him back. "He's gone!" Blood poured down the storekeeper's chest as the dead swarmed him. His screams turned to gurgles, then to silence. We had no choice but to keep running. The girl sobbed as we tore down another alley, the preacher crossing himself again and again. The farmhand spat curses, his face twisted with fury. We reached the edge of the schoolyard. The gate was splintered, fence torn down in places. Inside, bodies lay scattered. Teachers, ranch hands, townsfolk, torn and chewed. Some were still twitching. The sheriff stopped us short. "Careful," he warned. One of the bodies rolled over, face half-eaten, and dragged itself toward us. Another rose beside it, jaw dangling loose. The girl whimpered, pressing the shotgun tight to her chest. I shot the first through the head. The sheriff crushed the second's skull with the butt of his rifle. More began to stir, crawling, reaching, moaning. "They're everywhere," the farmhand said, panic in his voice. I pointed to the steps of the schoolhouse. "That's where we're going." We pushed forward through the yard, stomping down anything that grabbed at our boots. The preacher nearly lost his footing when a hand caught his ankle, but the sheriff yanked him free. The girl stayed close behind me, shaking but steady enough to follow. At the steps, the doors were barred from the inside. I pounded with my fist. "Open up!" I shouted. "Open, damn it!" No answer, just silence inside, broken by the moans rising all around us. The dead swarmed the fence, pouring through the gaps. They fell over one another, arms clawing, jaws snapping. Their weight rattled the ground. The sheriff slammed his shoulder against the doors. "Help us!" he bellowed. "For God's sake!" Still nothing. The farmhand's face twisted in rage. "They've locked us out!" He raised his rifle like he meant to fire through the windows, but the sheriff shoved it down. "Not now!" the sheriff barked. "We need in, not more dead!" I looked at the girl. Her hands trembled around the shotgun, tears streaking her face. Behind her, the preacher's lips moved in frantic prayer. The farmhand cursed, spittle flying. The sheriff braced the doors with his back, eyes darting to me. "They won't hold long," he said. I stared up at the bell tower, smoke curling from the roof. My gut twisted. My daughter was supposed to be here, but if the doors stayed shut, we'd die in the yard, torn apart like the rest. The moans rose higher, fingers clawed at my coat, teeth snapped inches from my neck. One way or another, we were going in. The barred doors shook under the sheriff's shoulder, wood groaning but holding firm. Behind us, the yard filled with groans and claws, the dead pouring through the broken fence like water through a cracked dam. "They ain't letting us in!" the farmhand shouted, panic twisting his voice. He jammed the butt of his rifle against the door, but it barely rattled the plank nailed across the inside. The sheriff snapped back. "Then we make 'em hear us." He slammed his rifle again, each hit booming like thunder. The girl fired her shotgun into the crowd, pressing through the fence, the blast scattering 2 of them, but leaving a dozen more clawing forward. The recoil dropped her to one knee. I grabbed her arm and yanked her upright before the next corpse reached her. "Don't waste shells," I told her. "They'll just keep coming." Her eyes were wet, her hands shaking. "Then what? We just stand here and die?" The preacher lifted his cross high, voice cracking as he bellowed prayers to a sky that wasn't listening. His words drowned under the moans of the dead. I put my back to the doors, revolver in hand, firing into the faces that pressed too close. Each shot was a heartbeat, each body dropping into the dust only to be trampled by more. My chambers were running thin. I could feel it. The farmhand turned on me, eyes wild. "This is your fault. Chasing after your girl, dragging us here. We'd have been clear if not for you." I shoved him back before his rifle could swing my way. "Clear where? You saw the streets. You saw the livery. There ain't no safe place left but what we make ourselves." The sheriff stepped between us, his voice sharp as iron. "Enough! We ain't got time for this." He glared at the door, then at the windows above. "If they won't open, we'll find another way." A face appeared in the bell tower window, small, pale, peering down at us. My heart clenched. For a moment, the noise faded. The world shrank to that single glimpse. My daughter. I shouted her name, voice breaking. "It's me! Open the door!" The figure vanished from sight. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd turned away, that maybe it hadn't been her at all. Then the sound came, a dragging scrape inside, the thud of wood pulled from iron brackets. The schoolhouse doors cracked open. A girl's voice, trembling but strong, called out, "Papa!" Before I could answer, the sheriff shoved the gap wider and herded us through. We stumbled inside, slamming the doors shut as the dead hurled themselves against the wood. Nails groaned, planks bent, but for the moment they held. The schoolhouse was dark, the air thick with smoke from a smoldering lamp. Desks were overturned, papers scattered. A few children huddled in the corner, eyes wide, faces pale. My daughter stood among them, older than the last time I'd seen her, but still my little girl. I dropped to my knees, pulling her into my arms. For the first time in years, I felt whole. The farmhand muttered, "We ain't out yet," his rifle hanging empty. The sheriff nodded grim. "He's right. This building won't hold forever." He looked to me, eyes hard. "We got a moment, maybe more. But if we're getting out, it's on you. You wanted her, now you tell us where the hell we go." The girl clutched my coat, her voice muffled against my chest. "They came this morning. They broke through the fences. Some of the teachers tried to fight, but..." Her voice cracked. "It's just us left." The preacher shook his head, face ashen. "We're cursed. All of us. This is the end." I stood, pulling her behind me, revolver heavy in my hand. The pounding on the doors grew louder, each slam rattling the floorboards. "No," I said, voice steady though my heart thundered. "This ain't the end." Not yet. Outside, the dead howled, and the wood began to splinter. The pounding at the doors grew louder, each slam rattling the schoolhouse like a storm against old wood. Dust rained from the rafters, the planks splintering under the weight of the dead. The children whimpered in the corner, their small voices like cracks in the silence between each blow. The sheriff planted his back against the doors, rifle braced like a bar. His face was pale with sweat. "They'll break through any minute," he growled. The farmhand cursed, pacing like a trapped wolf. "We're finished. We should have never come here." His eyes cut to me. "All for your damn girl. Now we're boxed in like cattle waiting for the slaughter." I checked my revolver. 2 rounds left. I spun the cylinder and snapped it shut. Better boxed in than running blind. We still got walls. We still got ground to stand on. The girl clutched her shotgun with white knuckles. Not for long, she whispered. The preacher lifted his cross, voice quivering as he shouted over the pounding. This is judgment. The wages of sin come due. The farmhand snapped. Shut your mouth! He raised his rifle at the preacher, finger twitching on the trigger. The sheriff barked, Stand down! He shoved the rifle barrel aside just as the doors cracked, a hand punching through, gray fingers clawing for us. The children screamed. I fired my second-to-last bullet, blowing the hand off at the wrist. The stump writhed, bloodless and black, as the body outside pressed harder. They'll be inside in seconds, I said. We need another way. The sheriff's eyes lifted to the rafters. The tower, he said. It's high, narrow. They can't swarm it so easy. The girl shook her head. And when they're at the base, we'll be trapped up there. Better trapped high than torn apart down here, the sheriff shot back. The children clung to one another, wide-eyed. My daughter looked at me, trembling. Papa? She asked. Just that one word, and it was enough. We go up, I said. The sheriff nodded. Move! We scrambled, dragging desks and benches to block the door for precious seconds. The pounding grew louder, the wood splitting with each hit. The farmhand nearly shoved two children aside in his rush for the ladder, but the girl smacked him across the shoulder with her shotgun. Help them, damn you! She spat. He glared, but grabbed a boy under the arm, hauling him up behind the preacher. One by one, we climbed the narrow ladder to the bell tower. The sheriff went last, shoving a desk in front of the ladder's base before scrambling up. Moments later, the doors burst open below, the crash echoing through the schoolhouse. The dead poured in, moaning, clawing, bodies slamming against overturned furniture. We pulled the last child up just as the first corpse slammed against the ladder, claws scraping wood. The sheriff leaned out and swung his empty rifle, cracking skulls until the weapon splintered in his hands. The tower swayed under our weight. From up here, the town stretched out like a graveyard. Smoke rose from burned-out roofs, and the streets crawled with the dead, dozens, hundreds, drawn by the noise. The girl whispered, There's no way out. Maybe there is, I said. I scanned the rooftops. A line of connected buildings ran east toward the edge of town, close enough that a desperate man might jump from one to the next. The sheriff saw it too. Rooftops, he said. Only shot we got. The farmhand's face twisted. That's suicide. Better than waiting to be dragged screaming out of this tower, I told him. Below, the ladder groaned as the dead began climbing, their weight bending the rungs. No more time, the sheriff said. He grabbed one of the children and swung across the gap to the nearest roof. He landed rough, rolled, then shouted back, Pass them over! One by one, we lifted the children through the narrow window. The farmhand hesitated, then shoved two across, nearly dropping one before the sheriff caught him. The girl followed, teeth gritted, landing hard, but alive. The preacher clutched his cross, muttering frantic prayers as he squeezed through. He nearly fell, but the farmhand caught his arm and hauled him over. My daughter came last. She looked up at me, tears streaking her face. Papa, please. I kissed her hair and lifted her through the window, setting her down on the roof beside the others. Then it was my turn. I holstered my revolver, climbed out onto the ledge, and leapt. My boots hit the roof, sliding on loose tiles, but the sheriff grabbed my coat and yanked me steady. The farmhand came last. For a moment I thought he'd make it, but his boot caught the ledge, and he fell short. His hands clawed for the roof's edge, fingers scraping stone. The girl screamed, grabbing for him, but he slipped. His scream cut off as the dead swallowed him below. The sheriff pulled us forward. No looking back, he said. Keep moving. We ran across the rooftops, jumping the gaps, tiles shattering underfoot. The dead surged below, following our shadows. My revolver weighed heavy at my side. 1 bullet left. Enough for her, if it came to that. Enough for me. But not today. We cleared the last roof, the edge of town just ahead. Beyond lay the open plains, endless and waiting. The wind carried smoke and rot, but also freedom. The sheriff dropped down first, pulling children after him. The girl followed, then the preacher, trembling but alive. My daughter clung to me, her breath hot against my neck. The dead roared behind us, but we kept running. Through dust, through smoke, through hell itself. And for the first time, I dared to think we might just live. The plains stretched wide and empty, but the dead were spilling after us, a tide of gray faces and clawing hands. The sheriff carried one of the children, the saloon girl pulled another, and the preacher stumbled like a man already half buried. My daughter clung to me, her small arms tight around my waist. I knew then we wouldn't all make it. Not at the pace of frightened children, not with the horde so close. I stopped, set her down gently in the dust. "You keep moving, darlin'," I whispered. "Stay with the sheriff. Don't you look back." Her eyes filled with tears, her voice cracked. "Papa, please, no." I brushed her hair back with a shaking hand. "Listen to me. I'd done a lifetime of wrong, but this I can do right. You go on, live. You remember me for this, not for the man I was." She clutched my coat, desperate. "I'll remember everything. I'll remember you." My throat closed, but I forced a smile. "That's enough for me." The sheriff stepped forward, face carved from sorrow. He opened his mouth, but I cut him off with a look. "Get her clear." "That's an order." He nodded once, heavy as the sky. I pulled the revolver and fired it into the air. The crack split the plains, echoing like thunder. Every pale head snapped my way. Their groans rose, and the tide turned toward me. "Come on, you bastards," I muttered, sliding the knife from my boot. I met my daughter's eyes one last time. She reached for me, lips trembling around the word Papa. That image, her face, her voice, burned brighter than the sun. I turned before it broke me. I ran, shouting, waving steel, the dead flooding after me. My boots carried me into a narrow gulch, stone walls rising sharp on both sides. A bottleneck, a place to stand. At the far end, I planted my feet. The first of them stumbled in, jaws snapping, hands grasping. I drove the knife through its skull, yanked free, slashed another across the throat. They piled in behind, snarling, filling the gulch. Steel flashed, bloodless rot spraying. I cut and stabbed, every blow buying them time out there on the plains. Teeth tore at my arm, claws raked my coat, but I swung until my body screamed. The knife stuck fast in bone. I yanked, pulled, cursed, but it wouldn't come free. Their weight crashed into me, dragging me to my knees. I looked up once more, past the gray faces, past the dust. In the distance, on the rise, I saw her, my daughter, held tight in the sheriff's arms. She was screaming my name, reaching for me across the endless stretch of earth. I smiled through the blood in my teeth. That was the last thing I saw. Then the horde swallowed me whole.